All right, it's time for the best, worst team in the NFL as our 2017 NFL preview continues. Brennan Albert is here. I am Adrian Fecchio. We are talking about the Colts. Back-to-back 8-win seasons. What the hell's going on in Indy?
Well, I've used this analogy. I had the opportunity to spend a couple years in Indy, and it was really cool to live there, and it's really cool to see how well the Colts are received there. But I used this analogy of a couple buddies. You know, Adrian, like how parents don't buy their kid a sports car as their first car because they're afraid they're going to speed it and wreck it, right? Well, Jim Irsay bought his son, Ryan Gigson, a sports car at Andrew Luck, and he drove it straight into a pole for several years in a row. All right, so the Colts have a very, very special situation. There's never been a team in the NFL who can say, oh, yeah, we just went from a Hall of Fame quarterback one bad year to potentially having a top 5 most talented quarterback in the NFL the next season. That just doesn't happen, and it's just been so disappointing to see the way the Colts have surrounded Andrew Luck, or more importantly, protected Andrew Luck. So, Adrian, I think your statement there of the best, worst team in the NFL is 100% accurate when it comes to the Colts.
Yeah, because on the surface, you look at Andrew Luck, you might be like, all right, well, they should be winning 9-10 games. And, you know, I got them at 5 wins. I know you got them at 8. Like, I don't see them sniffing the playoffs again this year. And a big reason for that is that man you talked about, Ryan Gigson. This guy stunk up the joint, couldn't surround Andrew Luck with talent. And instead of building a defense the one year, they went and tried drafting Philip Dorsett. Like, what the hell was that all about?
Yeah,
so, go ahead.
My issue is, like, I can deal if you want to build up the offense and be a completely offensive dominant team and not really have a lot in defense. And really, traditionally, that's what the Colts have been. You know, I mean, of course, when you have a guy like Andrew Luck and then you had a guy like Peyton Manning, you know, you're going to win games just on offense alone. So I understand that. But Ryan Grigson, he drafted 10 offensive linemen during his tenure in Indy, which is pretty normal, okay? It's about 2 a year for his time. Now, here's the problem. Those 10 he drafted, only 2 of them are actually starting offensive linemen. And then the other problem he has is the average draft position for those 10 offensive linemen was late 4th, early 5th round. That's simply not investing in protection for your $1 million quarterback. So, you know, there's a big, big decision that they made in the right direction to move on from him. And I think Chris Ballard did a nice job at really addressing needs. And I think they're still going to need to keep addressing needs on the offensive line.
Yeah, and then you got the defense too. I mean, we were joking around last week. Can you even name 3 players on that Colts defense?
I mean, the first 2 I think of are rookies, and that's not really a positive sign for stability. I mean, I have the Colts this year, Adrian, going 8-8, and the reason I have that is I think they'll probably split with everyone in the division. So there's 3 wins there. Now, let me kind of rattle off some of the other teams they get. They have to go play the Bills, which I think is a win. Then they have the Browns at home, another win. So now we're at 5. I think they'll beat the Ravens. The Ravens just can't seem to stay away from the injury bug. It's in Baltimore late in the season, but I still think the Colts beat them. So now you're at 6. Then you have the Niners at home. There's 7. And then you get the Rams away. There's 8. I mean, the Colts have a really, really good schedule. They're going to be one of those teams that, you know, if they make the playoffs, I don't think it's impossible. But if they make the playoffs, it's not necessarily as much about how successful they were as they have a schedule that really favors them to be a really more successful team than their talent actually shows in the roster.
Yeah. If that offensive line can hold up well enough, I mean, maybe they can get to 9 wins even. But, I mean, I look at that O-line. They're getting there. You know, it's not like it's been Costanzo's getting there. Jack Mewhort's a good guard. Ryan Kelly, the center, the one they drafted in 2016. So, you know, maybe they're starting to make positive strides because it has been so bad in India along that offensive line, and it has stunted Andrew Luck's growth. I mean, we're talking pre-show. It's like they were hailing Andrew Luck as the next savior. He was supposed to be the guy, and I mean, it's unfair to say that. I don't want to use the word overrated, but he's definitely not the best quarterback in the league. He's top 5-ish.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're saying here is you could argue that Andrew Luck has underachieved based on where he was, you know, slated to be and all that. I mean, right now he's probably
it's not fair to say, but like his expectations were that high.
And you're 100% right, Adrian. I mean, he's definitely a top 8 quarterback in the NFL. So I mean, look. Almost every team in the NFL would say, if you want Andrew Luck, they would say, yes, absolutely, we'll take Andrew Luck, right? So we're not saying that. But he hasn't really been put in a position to succeed. I think the one thing I'll also kind of say, I think the most untalked about thing in the NFL this offseason is the fact that Andrew Luck has still not thrown a football since his surgery in January. Now, his rehab has him throwing tennis balls right now, which I guess is a start, but this is a big concern for me because, they gave him a big contract. Talent is there. Boy, I would just feel horrible for the Colts if Andrew Luck could somehow not rehab back to his prime.
Yeah. Ever since that contract, man, because that team can't draft. They haven't been able to draft at all. Looking at that defensive side of the ball, ever since Robert Mathis had 19 and a half sacks, 2013 or 14, whatever it was, they can't generate any pressure.
No.
They drafted Bjorn Werner.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. You look at that draft class he had in 2013. That was a bad draft class he had. There's no one in that draft class who really stood out. The 2015 class was another one that was a bad draft class. Henry Anderson, I guess, is a guy you still have some hope and some promise there with
I like him, actually, yeah.
I think he's fine, but I don't think he's someone who's going to be a double-digit sack guy in the league. So you're still in trouble there with getting pressure off the edge.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get into the offensive defense a little bit more specifically a little bit later. Let's talk about the offseason acquisitions. What did you think?
It's one of those situations that I think the Colts had a really darn good offseason. Now, all that said,
they signed so many players.
Yeah, they did a war by attrition, kind of bringing a whole bunch of faces. Obviously, Jabal Sheard is the big name that they brought in there. So hopefully he can be that Swiss Army knife in the 3-4 defense, help bring some pressure for them. I really like what they did in the draft. This year, I think that they had a really good draft this year. I like Malik Hooker, especially they got him as late as he was. I don't think anyone thought he was going to slide to 15. Quincy Wilson comes in and can be a good starter for them. And then they have two guys that I kind of circle, and I'm kind of a big question mark on how quickly can they develop into the NFL. Zach Banner, guy from USC, I'd love to see him develop and see if he can slide over to right tackle, because if that's the case, then all of a sudden that bad offensive line for the Colts now has 4 guys with some good promise. So that could be a nice situation. And then a guy, Adrian, you and me are big, big fans of, is Marlon Mack. I don't see any reason that Marlon Mack can't have every opportunity to take over that number 2 spot and potentially take over Frank Gore's spot in a year or two from now.
I want to see him be the starter, to be honest with you. Like Frank Gore, what does he really have left, Play Mack. We'll see. What did Gore average last? Wasn't he like 3.5 yards per carry? It was something real bad.
Yeah, it's something like that. Frank Gore was 7th in the league in most carries last season. So, he's getting the rock. So as far as the fantasy value, you're getting him late. He's never going to be a guy who's going to have, 5 touchdowns or maybe even more than 2 touchdowns in a game this season. That's just not his ability anymore. But he's a stud. He's going to get the rock handed to him. So, yeah, Marlon Mack, hey, you have no reason to not be the number 2 running back in the Indianapolis Colts. You have no reason not to be number 2, really. Yeah.
Now, getting back to the offseason acquisitions just really quickly, because there's 4 names that I kind of highlight here, and you talked about, Jabal Sheard already. Because some of the names they signed, a little bit on the underrated side. You look at John Simon from Houston. He's a really good player. I think Al Woods, the nose tackle, has always been a solid run stuffer when he was in Tennessee. And Jonathan Hankins, what can you get from him? He used to be dominant for the Giants. He's kind of fallen back a little bit, but we'll see what he can do. So they got some guys. Problem is all these guys, you got to now fit them together and have them play together. This is the whole dream team scenario that you remember with the Eagles. When you sign a bunch of guys, you got to have it work out too, chemistry-wise. So we'll see.
They brought a lot of new faces on in the D-line.
A lot. It really is. Yeah.
They need to get tougher in the trenches, both sides of the ball. They really do. And they really do. So with what they did in the offseason, personally for me, I think they probably had one of the best, if not the best, offseason in the NFL of any team, because they addressed so many of their needs. I don't think they have any bad contracts or guys that they said, whoa, you way overpaid for. I think everything they did was really appropriate, but they're still not a great team. They're moving in the right direction, still not a great team.
Yeah. All right, let's go position by position now. We focused on Andrew Luck. Do you want to talk more about the running backs, or do we kind of focus enough about it?
I do want to kind of highlight one thing here. This is what I think is a big, big reason why Marlon Mack is gonna have the opportunity. So last year, Frank Gore had 260 carries attempts, which ranks him 7th in the NFL, 263 to be exact, 7th in the NFL. So fantasy purpose wise, hey, he's getting the rock. He's going to get the opportunities. Awesome, Frank Gore. Every year he's getting older. We get that, but he still is very solid back. Now here's the problem for the Colts. Take a guess, Adrian. You know who the second most carries for the Colts was last year?
Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck. Okay. Andrew Luck had 64 carries. So to be clear, Frank Gore almost had 200 more carries than the second guy on the Colts roster, and it was the quarterback who can't stay protected. Okay? This is a massive issue in Indy. Robert Turbin was the third, and he had 47 carries. Look, there's no reason that Marlon Mack shouldn't be able to walk in and take 50 carries as a rookie. There's just no reason for it. So Marlon Mack is a guy I'm circling, and I'm saying, man, you got to do something because the Colts need depth at running back badly.
Yeah, he was the first guy to break the 1,000-yard mark since Joseph Adai in 2007. Not that. Now, I'm looking it up. What was his yards per carry? Maybe I was wrong about what my initial instincts were. He got over 1,000 yards. He was at 3.9. All right, so I kind of shorted him a little bit, but he didn't get the 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a solid year, all considering he is one of the NFL's oldest running backs, and he's not exactly playing behind the Dallas Cowboys or the Tennessee Titans offensive lines. But I mean, overall, my whole thing is Frank Gore is the hammer. He's a solid workhorse. We know what he's going to do. He's still a very good receiver at the backfield, but Marlon Mack, he's the elusive guy. He can be the guy who can really give that Colts a new weapon out of the backfield.
Let's talk receivers now. It used to be a lot more dynamite than it is now, but you still got T.Y. Hilton. Dorsett's been a bust. Got Dante Moncrief, who just got hurt. Besides that, who else you got a wide receiver on this team? Yeah,
I mean, T.Y. Hilton's a stud. I mean, most people – I think when people think about T.Y., I think a lot of people view him as, you know what, he's probably like a really good fantasy number 2. And I think a lot of people, they go into it with this notion of, he's a small guy, so he's probably an injury concern. Not really. I mean, T.Y., he's playing multiple games. He's been playing multiple 16-game seasons now. So T.Y.'s a dude. Moncrief, he had a rough year last year, fighting off some toe and some shoulder injuries. Only played 9 games. But the cool thing I really like about Moncrief is he's got 16 touchdowns in 41 games he's played in the NFL, which gives him about 40% of the games Moncrief plays, he's scoring a touchdown. So he's a big red zone threat. He is a very good receiver. Now, he's in a contract year. So I'm kind of curious to see, hey, is he playing hurt this year? Because he might have been hurt last year versus being injured, because there is a difference. So Moncrief, I want to see how he's going to do this season. Then they went out and they signed Kamar Aiken from the Baltimore Ravens, another big body receiver. He's a possession guy. Not going to beat you over the top, but he can move the chains and win some of the physical balls. And then you have Philip Dorsett. And Philip Dorsett, without a question in my mind, is the guy on the hot seat for me because he's really not shown anything. Even in the couple games where T.Y.'s been down, everyone said, all right, well, Philip Dorsett physically has exact same kind of deal. What T.Y. can do, slide him in. And a lot of times you forgot Philip Dorsett was on the field.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Kamar Aiken. I thought that was a solid signing for them, considering I don't like the depth that they have. So it's like, besides that, they got like a guy named Quan Bray, if you know Quan Bray, and it's like the 4th guy. Oh, come on. Jack Doyle, the tight end, I think he's been a guy that's been overachieving over the last couple of years, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what the Colts had really a solid 3 tight ends for a while there, Colby Fleener, Dwayne Allen, and then Jack Doyle. So now Jack Doyle all of a sudden becomes a starter. I'm not a huge Jack Doyle fan, but that said, I mean, aside from Moncrief, there's no real physical receiver there in Indy. So Jack Doyle's probably going to be a guy getting 50 receptions. Will probably get 500, 600 yards, which is solid for a tight end, probably 5 or 6 touchdowns. He'll be one of those, probably the 12th tight end, 10th tight end taken in your fantasy league. He's fine, but he's nothing flashy there.
Yeah. Now we've mentioned how the offensive line has been a mess over recent years, but heading into this year, maybe there is just some stability. What do you think?
Well, we got three good options here in Indy,
Yes.
and we're moving in the right direction, which is the key thing. So, obviously at left tackle, Anthony Costanzo, he's one of the better run blockers in the NFL as a left tackle. So we have that shirt up there in Indy. Then we talked about Jack Mewhort, there at left guard, kind of out of Ohio State. He was a second-round pick that was invested in highly, and turns out then Ryan Kelly turned out to be a pretty good, solid, center. And I think everyone knew, hey, Ryan Kelly's going to be a good player for them. But the center position traditionally doesn't really get valued highly in the NFL draft, which is why we saw him slide, even though we all knew he was going to be a stud. And then there's question marks on the right side. Right guard is an open situation. Lorraine McClark was the guy who played right tackle in the past for the Colts, and he's not very good. So insert Zach Banner having the opportunity to be a starter there. So the Colts are moving in the right direction. To be able to say they now have three solid offensive linemen is a massive, massive improvement. You just hope that injury history with Luck isn't permanently damaged by this point.
Yeah, another guy that they signed this offseason, but I'm seeing that he's on the PUP list, is Brian Schwenke, and I think that would probably be the best option for them at right guard.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible, Adrian. I think when we talked about what the Colts did is they brought in a lot of unnamed guys who played a couple years. You talked about Kamar Aikens, like another one. Brian Schwenke's another one. He's probably a guy who's going to be a rotation guard for you. And in his point in his career, where I think he's probably best suited is as a rotational third guard in the NFL. But in the Colts, he could very well end up being a starting right guard for them.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. Who on this team can pressure the quarterback? Anybody?
I guess Jamal Sheard. Someone's got to do it, right? There's just not a lot. The Colts finished last year with only 33 sacks, which puts them in the bottom third in the NFL for sacks. So that's not always a great barometer of success for a defense. But if you don't have a lot of pressure, and prior to this year you didn't have great defensive backs, that's a little concerning. So, yeah, up front, Adrian, that front seven is bad. It's probably one of the worst front sevens, if not the worst front seven in the NFL. There's just not much there.
Yeah, they just got a bunch of guys just bunched together, basically, and they're going to try to mix in these offseason acquisitions with Hankins. So they brought in Marcus Hunt from the Bengals. Oh, so he's going to start for them too?
Yeah. I saw a really cool stat in Pro Football Focus, which I love. I love Pro Football Focus, but they had a stat that said 10 linebackers last year for the Colts played over 125 snaps. So that's saying, hey, we let everyone get a fair shot, and we couldn't find an answer there. So, in Indy, the front seven is still very much in limbo. They're still very much trying to figure it out.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on to the secondary now. Vontae Davis. How good is he? Because you remember a couple years ago, he was like almost basically a top 5 corner, even top 3. And now he kind of comes off a bad year. So just how good is he?
He's very good. I like Vontae Davis a lot. I think he's one of those guys when we look at him, I think he's best as an off guy. He's super quick. He's explosive. He's a ball hawk. I like him a lot. The problem is when you get into those type of situations where you don't have a ton of help over the top or off or the opposite side of you, you're going to get exposed a little more. But I like Vontae Davis a lot. Top 10 maybe is probably a little high, but I think he's in that mix.
Yeah, he was. I like 2 years ago, I had him top 5. Because he came off that one huge year. Let me see. Where do I have him? I have him at 14.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I think that's kind of similar to what we just said. I kind of mentioned, just shy of a top 10 guy.
Yeah, and we'll see who starts alongside him, whether it's going to be Rashawn Melvin, Quincy Wilson, whoever. So,
yeah. I think that's what we have there. Now, when we look back at the safety, bringing in Malik Hooker, who is the ball hawk. He's that single high free safety, Earl Thomas-like guy. Now, the question is Malik Hooker the real deal? Because he doesn't have a large career of college being able to show that. Had a great season, but, still a little concerned if he's going to be a surefire thing. And then unfortunately they lost Mike Adams, who was a Pro Bowler last year, which is something a lot of people don't really recognize. So there's kind of that. There's kind of a question there. Now they do have Clayton Gaithers, who was a rookie 2 years ago now, excuse me. Had a good year last year, one of the better developing safeties. So if he develops and if Hooker develops, we have a really nice young tandem there at the safety position. And then if Quincy Wilson develops at the opposite corner, all of a sudden the Colts DB situation looks solved.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We talked hot seat. Who's underrated on the Colts?
Ooh, that's a good one. Man, that's a tough one. You know, shoot. Hang on.
Maybe.
He might be. I mean, he's a really good run stuffer, but that's not sexy. You know, it's kind of like we talk with Eagles fans about Brandon Graham. On surface, people are like, oh, he sucks. But then when you look more in his statistics, you're like, actually, he's better than people give him credit for. Who's yours, Adrian? Let me think.
I'm looking at some of these off-season acquisitions, like a Jabal Sheard. I feel like he's kind of underrated among the NFL circles. Maybe Mewhort, the left guard.
Yeah, that's fair.
John Simon's a little underrated too.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go Frank Gore, and the reason I say that is because he is the model of consistency in the NFL for a running back, and I think people and I'm guilty of this too. Everyone year after year, there's two guys, and you sit around anyone fantasies group, and when one of these two guys are drafted, everyone says, "Oh, this is the year he's gonna slide." Frank Gore and Larry Fitzgerald. Every single year, everyone's fantasy group says, oh, this is the year he's going to drop. And every single year, both of those guys get a year older and production doesn't drop. So I would say Frank Gore is underrated in the Colts situation.
So let's see. Is anyone else in the hot seat? Is there anyone else you want to talk about for that?
I mean, Phil Dorsett's got to be the hot seat candidate here. Yeah. I mean, I just can't see another person there. So Dorsett's my hot seat candidate. I won't say he's a hot seat guy, but I'm just circling it. Dante Moncrief being in a contract year doesn't necessarily mean you're in a hot seat to lose your job, because I think the Colts still will re-sign him. But the question is just going to be how much the Colts willing to pay him. So he's got to have a good year. He got to be able to show that that toe and that shoulder injury is not a lingering concern for them.
Okay. Are we missing something? Or we got it?
The one thing I want to highlight in fantasy here, okay? So Dante Moncrief, as I am a big fan of him, but he's probably going to be the guy in your fantasy league who's going to get overdrafted. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but Dante Moncrief, his whole appeal is he's a touchdown scorer. Being touchdown dependent isn't always a really good recipe for success, because if we see Jack Doyle start to be a model of consistency health-wise, which is what Dwayne Allen never was for the Colts, all of a sudden there's another red zone threat, and it's not just Dante Moncrief. So Dante Moncrief is probably a guy who's going to get drafted in your 6th round ballpark, probably be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for your fantasy team, based on how many teams you have in your league, so 6th round-ish. But if you wait till the 8th round, you're going to get guys like potentially Deckard, Rashad Matthews from the Titans, Kenny Britt. All of these guys can realistically put up 60 receptions, 700 receiving yards, and maybe 5 to 8 touchdowns. And that's pretty similar to what Dante Moncrief's going to get. Listen, I understand the appeal for Dante Moncrief, obviously playing with a way better quarterback and a way better offense than all those other guys I just mentioned. But production-wise, I don't think it's a stretch to say his numbers are going to be pretty similar to some of those other guys I just mentioned 2 rounds later.
There it is. All right. It's a wrap on the Colts. Got it all previewed up. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. We're going to do the Tennessee Titans up next. So we're going to talk about Marcus Mariota and their playoff aspirations there in Nashville. So Brendan Albert, I'm Adrian Fedke. We'll be right back. Peace.
Appreciate it.